All right, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to be talking today about planning the right jail at the right cost. I'm Eric Gratz from DLZ, and I'm a principal architect, and my specialty, or the area that I lead, is the correctional design, or justice design, what we call it at DLZ. Since the 1970s, DLZ has been working on correctional type facilities throughout the Midwest, and over that period of time, we've designed and planned nearly 25,000 rated beds of various types, whether juvenile, adult detention, or community correction type things. We've been involved in over 145 facility designs, and we have completed at least 86 correctional studies throughout the Midwest. And we'll talk about some of these good aspects from this because I think altogether, Engineering News Record has ranked us the #1 correctional design firm in the Midwest for at least the past 7 years. Something that our team of the folks that work in architecture and building engineering, we do a lot of this type of work throughout the Midwest, and it's something we're very proud of. One of the things I think that just to really kind of jumpstart this is let's kind of look at what today's inmates are compared to what they used to be. A sheriff one time told me that there really should be 3 doors to a jail. One is for the bad. Door number 1, we'll say, is for the bad. That's really the fewest amount of inmates that are in the facility. And if you historically think about why and how jails were designed, it was in essence for the bad guys. The typical analogy of the 6-sided concrete box, put them in, lock the door, and that's what they're there for. However, what we have seen is that since the 1980s, there's been a big emphasis on door number 2 and door number 3. Door number 2 is the addictions. This is where the inmates, they typically really struggle in that door, behind that door number 1 type of design. Although these types of inmates are probably the least harmful to themselves, they just mentally, they fail in this type of a situation. There's very few programs that are designed in older facilities, and they just simply don't work. Door number 3 is typically inmates that have the most issues, that mostly they will be most harmful. They will lash out at other people, and they need a lot of different types of needs than what you have even in door number 1 or door number 2. So what we're going to talk about today is how do we address all 3 doors in a facility and planning the right jail at the right cost. And what I mean by designing the right jail is making sure that you're addressing all the needs, the societal needs of inmates today, but also that you're designing a facility that meets your needs over the next 20 to 30 years. Really don't want to, look at doing designs that are just way overbuilding, that do not address these needs, and thus, in essence, as the term is called, we're just warehousing inmates. What we're trying to do is look at something different, something that is better overall. So if we look back over the last 100 years, you can see that from the 30s to the 90s that the number of folks that were in jail and prison, and also in prisons, different jails are at the county level, prisons are at the state and federal level, is that in the 1990s there was a spike, basically almost a vertical spike. And in fact, that if you turn back the clock 40 years, or almost 40 years, we're seeing that there's nearly 800,000 more people in jail and prison today than there was. So what happened? If you look back at history, you can see in the 1980s that President Reagan and his wife Nancy, one of their big platforms was war on drugs, and made a significant impact of how they were addressing folks that were not just using, but also dealing drugs, and it resulted in a lot of folks being incarcerated in facilities. In the 1990s, the federal government started to mainstream a lot of the mental institutions across the country, and jails, unfortunately, became one of the landing spots for these folks. During the same period of time, another large spike was the female population. Typically, what you would see in jails, designed 30, 40 years ago, that less than 5% of the jail population was for females. Today, it's nearing 25% that are females. And there's a lot of different reasons and causes for that, but That's three of the biggest reasons why our jails are really overcrowded today. And again, they're not designed correctly to meet what these needs are. So one of the things that people talk about all the time is the different synthetic drugs and over the years, what those impacts have been. And looking at some information that we received from National Vital Statistics is that, really the first drug that came out that was a major impact was more the oxycodone, all the different oxy versions and the hydro versions. And you can see that there was some pretty significant upfront around 2008, 9, 11 in those time periods, but that has really leveled off. 2010, heroin became, in essence, the choice drug of a lot of drug users. A lot of the meth users were switching to heroin because of just the characteristics, the physical characteristics were not as severe as for a heroin user as it was for a meth user. And then in the last 5 or 7 years, the fentanyl has really taken off, and it is basically a 90-degree straight up, and it is going extremely high. Fentanyl, as most people know, is one of the most lethal drugs there is. People are not used to it, and then they get a very clear dose of fentanyl that's a much higher. You can see a lot of deaths very quickly in the use of that. So what we're looking at is how we are redefining our designs in correctional facilities, is looking at a lot at behavioral health planning and design of facilities, of realizing that the inmates that are going to jail, at least 70% of them are having mental health issues, addiction issues, and we've got to treat facilities much different. Couple of things to just look at, and there's a lot of information on the slide, but a couple of the things to look at is that there are priority populations in a facility. It's not just the person that has a DWI or is, domestic violence, but there's a lot of different things that a severe level and persistent levels of mental illness that has to be addressed. We've got many different types of substance abuse and disorders throughout a facility, and a local county jail, they have to be able to respond to all of these different things. A big thing that over the last 10 years or so is how do we, the continuum of care, how do we get someone inside the facility ready to return safely to the community? And this has been a struggle for so many facilities because the program spaces that may or may not have been designed in the 1980s, 1990s, early 2000 facilities have been turned into just additional general population housing. But what we really need is these program spaces such that we can do some rehabilitation for these inmates to, in essence, reduce the overall recidivism for them. It's the concept of, if we provide more program space, more program opportunities, thinking for a change, help them to get their GED, do some of these better things, is that then they become better citizens once they get out of the facility. In essence, as the sheriff has told me, is they grow up, and once they grow up, then the recidivism rate will become lower, and then they won't repeat and go back into the facility. So a lot of what we're saying here today is really stressing the program side of the facilities, normalizing the facilities to make the opportunities for the inmates to become better people and make better decisions. So one of the things we look at is evidence-based treatment approaches. There's a lot of different ways that programs can be offered, whether it's a therapeutic community that offers people just trades that they can learn, that they can take out back into their everyday life to be able to work and to do some things. So I want to show you an image here. This is a project that we had in construction right now, just started the second phase of the project, but this is actually where we are redefining corrections. And you might look at this as a housing unit and go, wow, this is very different than what we are typically seeing. That's very true. This is for low-level felons, low-level misdemeanors that are in a facility, folks that are there that of low risk, low security issues. And a lot of this is we're simply changing colors of, instead of the battleship gray colors in the facilities, we're changing it to more warm, more normalized colors, and even some materials in the overall facility for this. This is also a gender responsive design for females. This will be used for females. It's the Franklin County project in Columbus, Ohio. We've been very fortunate to be the lead on the project for this. But also in just looking at some materials, and what the strategy here is that if we can normalize the space, have softer materials, but still obviously detention grade materials, is that we're able to help the inmates, to help them focus and be more encouraged about having more rehabilitation, more programming in the overall facility. As you can see, there's a tremendous amount of natural light that comes into the space. And then if you would turn 180 degrees and look just the opposite, you would see the very typical cells. You'd see the glass fronts in the cells and the doors for all of those, but this is really the day room space, and then in the background area is the rec space, the recreation space, but also for the programming from that point. So something very different, but something that what Franklin County has looked at is they're actually building a new facility that has less bed capacity because their programming and rehabilitation has reduced the recidivism, and thus they do not need as many beds in their facility. So a feasibility study. So often counties, we get the phone calls and the emails and the proposals, and they say, hey, we want to do a feasibility study. We're over capacity, our facility has a lot of needs, and we need DLZ to come and talk to us to see what we need to develop as a new project. So the owner, you have a lot of visions, you have a lot of ideas, but also you got a fiscal responsibility of making sure that whatever you do is the right thing to do. So with the design team here at DLZ is that, we listen a lot. The owner communicates, and then we listen back to the owner. We listen and communicate back to the owner with a feasibility study. And it's really a document that defines and identifies what a scope of work, a budget, and a schedule is. Not to simplify this, but in essence, that is the root of what a feasibility study is. There's a lot of things that go into it, which we will mention a few of the items here, but it's something that really starts off at the beginning of a project. I often say that the feasibility study is the most important phase of an overall project, because this is also the phase where you get the community engagement. Some people, it may be the first time they've heard that there could be a correctional project in their local community. And too often, folks, they just don't understand the process. So what we like to really stress is, why are we doing this? And then we will talk about the how we are doing it, and then obviously with all the costs that are associated with it. When you're doing a feasibility study, again, I think the most important thing is, whether it takes you a month, a year, or multiple years, is make sure that you do your due diligence and develop the quality of the feasibility study, because in essence, that will be the recipe for the rest of the project. One of the things that we do in a feasibility study is what we call the LCCA, or the life cycle cost analysis. And what we're doing here is a visual observation of the existing facility. In essence, it's a facility assessment. We're looking at all the different components of the building, of the existing facility, to look to see how we can prolong the life of the facility. Maybe it's another 10 years, maybe it's 20 years. And we've developed a pretty unique graph, or a spreadsheet in the bottom right, that is a strong graphic that you can use in a community type basis of a presentation. On the left, we identify many different components, whatever discipline it is, site, inside the building, the security aspect, mechanical aspect, whatever. We identify all the items. And then what we're doing is we're projecting what the life expectancy is for each one of those. If it is good, we color coded in green. The last 5 years of a typical life expectancy, we change it to yellow. And then once it has reached its normal life expectancy, we turn the color to red. Kind of reminds me of like the little sticker you may have on your windshield in the upper left-hand corner when you need to get an oil change. In essence, it's the same approach here. One of the good things about a public presentation with an item like this is you can see there's an awful lot of green on these charts, which can show that the county is doing good preventive maintenance to prolong the life of the building, but just with any materials or any systems in the building, they obviously need to be replaced at some point in time. From the funding mechanism of a county is that they can also start to project of when those costs are going to be needed, such that they have monies available to make sure that they can do the projects. We've had a lot of counties ask us, hey, strike these two blue lines, which you might be able to see on the graph, and basically anything to the right of the blue line, or excuse me, anything to the left of the blue line on the right is work that needs to be done. So they can proactively plan and finance upcoming projects. It's a fantastic tool that a lot of counties appreciate. One of the other aspects of doing planning of a facility is how large does the jail need to be from a capacity point of view? How many rated beds do I need? And as we develop our jail capacity forecasts or studies, there's really 4 data types that are very important for us to look at. And we analyze. Typically what we will ask is for counties from the jail management system, the data of all the inmates, is to give us as many years back as you possibly can. Too often, unfortunately, it's only 2 or 3 years because they've changed their platform for that, or they've changed how they do it, and some of the numbers are not always accurate. But if we can get 10 years of data, what we're able to do is in our proprietary spreadsheets is that we can load the information both for males and females and all the different classifications and the rest and different items for the inmates, and we can really project some good information to see what the next 20, 25 years of what a true forecast of what the beds can be. The 4 things that we typically look at is the county population trend. Is it a county that is growing rapidly? Is it one that is losing population? Or is it something that is a fairly stagnant population from that? And there's a lot of things that we will meet with economic development folks to just look at if there's spikes in population, what are the reasons, or at the same time, why are there reductions in the overall county population? Admissions to the county jail. How many folks are being arrested and incarcerated in the facility? It's an important note to have. I would say that the last 70 plus weeks with the COVID pandemic is that this is one that has typically seen a big decline. Low-level folks are just simply not being incarcerated in a facility such that you've seen the numbers come way down across most of the average daily population in jails. The next line item that we look at is, to me, the most important one, and it is the average length of stay. Is once you're incarcerated, you're booked in, you're incarcerated into the local facility, how long do you stay? Is it 3 days? Is it 33 days? Is it 3 years at the local facility? And to me, this is the one that drives the capacity of the facility as much or more than anything. And we talk quite often with our clients is how can we, as a justice system, with the courts, the prosecutor, the probation, community corrections, the sheriff, how can we work together to make sure that we are getting the incarcerated inmates their due time in court, and then to get them sentenced or get them released so that they're out of the county jail. The longer they're in jail, the more beds we have, because just what the needs are. So if a person's in jail for 3 days, that's one thing, but if that same person is in jail for 3 months, you can just see there's that space in jail that we need to be able to look at it. Each state varies considerably in the average length of stay, but I think that if you can look at, you can all work together, that if you can push those days down as much as possible, it can actually reduce the size of the jail that would be required. Then the other item that we look at is the average daily population, is how many people are in the jail typically at midnight. There's counts, daily populations throughout the day can go up and down, but we'll take a snapshot of what time of the day and use that over our full jail management system, the JMS, of what is that average daily population. We'll also look at a high daily population. There could be a peak at some point in time, but those are important things to note. And we will look at that both for males and females over a long duration of time. So as we develop a study on what is the right size of folks that are, or inmates that are needed in a facility, one of the things that's important to note is that there is a organization that's part of the U.S. Department of Justice called the National Institute of Corrections. The NIC is more commonly called. The NIC is basically the Google for all of the jails and detention facilities across the country. They collect data from most all facilities over a long period of time, and they also offer a tremendous amount of resources free to local agencies about how to do different things at a facility, how to plan a facility, how to design a facility, how to address pandemics, how to address retention of staff. It's if anything today, you're taking notes, if you can Google the NIC, you can just see that it's a fantastic resource for information. But one of the things that over decades of experience, and also DLZ comes to the same conclusions on this, is that jails are most efficient. They operate at the most safe and secure level when they are 80% full. In essence, we design our buildings, our jails, to be 80% full. At that point in time, you're still able to classify the incarcerated inmates. You're still able to separate the prey and the predator within the facility. And obviously, it's just as important is to be equal for the staff working in the facility. This does not mean that a facility cannot go to 100 people, or 100% full in a facility, or some of you may be 150% full, but the jails are really designed to be 80% full. They work best at that percent, even better than when it's at 60%, because that's just the way it works. So if we did a jail projection study and we determined that, approximately 160 or so inmates is what the jail capacity needs are 20 years out, is that, we look at that approximately 20% to 25% in some cases, depends on the size of the facility, of looking at adding those extra beds for those peaks, those high daily populations, or there can be just other situations, some overcrowding due to a change in legislation, but you've got some flexibility with the overall facility. So if we're looking at a 200 rated bed jail, that's 160 for the projected inmates, then we have the 40 beds that would be for the 80% role. And so often counties go, I just can't afford to build the 200 bed jail. I can only do a 160 bed jail. And these numbers obviously can be whatever you need to be. This is just as an example for this. So when you do the 160, is you just got to realize that the potential is that you can be at 100% occupancy, that you're going to be limiting your classification and the separation of your prey and the predator, and can actually potentially have detriments to the safety of the folks, not just in the facility, but also working in the facility. Some other counties in the last few years have said, hey, we've got opportunities here, let's overbuild, and let's look at the opportunities to be able to house inmates from other counties or other agencies. And let's look at some ways to generate some additional revenue with that. I would caution on that because we really believe that you can spend more money than is necessary, but also at the same time, at some point in time, is if you're doing the programming, you're doing the rehabilitation, you're doing the reducing the recidivism rates, reintegrating folks into the community, you can have a lot of empty jail beds. And that can be a very costly approach to that. We would rather you look at designing the right jail, the right size for the right cost, for the right reasons. And that's why we go through our studies on this. And we feel strongly that that is the best solution for that. A question that's always asked is, what do we do? We have a facility that's built in 1984. Do we renovate it? Do we expand it? Or do we need to go out and build a new facility? One thing to keep in mind in jails is that they are used 24 hours a day, 7 days a week by folks that really just don't want to be in that facility. There's a lot of abuse, vandalism inside of a facility, and it's something that is very different than most other types of buildings, just because a 30-year-old jail may be closer to a 70 or 80, 90-year-old jail as far as the condition of the building. Not due to the lack of preventive maintenance, it's just due to the wear and tear of the folks that are in the facility. So some of the things that we look at is, does the current jail, if we expand the facility or renovate, is it going to meet the state jail standards? Is it going to meet the American Correctional Association, the compliance issues with a facility? And is there ADA compliance? You know, a facility built before 1990 to now make it ADA compliant, especially in a correctional facility, can be extremely expensive to do, sometimes not even possible to do with that. And then the other thing that we always look at is just the staffing efficiency. Jails today, simply put, they're just much more efficient. And we have a slide coming up to talk about why staffing the right number, doing the right things in the facility, why it's so important. And it's just as important to know the staffing costs as it is to do the building cost. You know, at DLZ, we've done a lot of renovations. We've done a lot of expansions to facilities, but there are times when the building the new facility is the right answer. And we will walk through in our feasibility studies to help make that decision to make sure that we're doing the right jail for you. Understanding the staffing cost. Really, there's three different ways to look at what a building and staff may cost. One is the total employee cost, the capital cost, and then all the other costs associated with the building. If you look over a 20-year period, almost 3/4 of the cost of that building is not the bricks and mortar to build the building. It's actually the employees working in the building that is the much greater cost for that. For an example, if you have a new jail, say it's a couple hundred bed jail, and it's going to cost $25 million to build it, and with financing, maybe another 25% on top of it. So say it's a $30 million project, construction and financing. If you look inside your facility and you believe that from master control to the intake booking area, the rovers that go around the building, just the people operating and running the jail, if you say that, we need 5 dedicated posts that are manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That can be an expensive line item. But if we look at that, is that a post that is manned 24/7 takes 5 people to be able to operate that one post. That's with the shift relief, with the vacations, the training, everything else that goes into that. So if you would look at an average jailer, correctional officer, or deputy, whatever the terminology you want to use for that, but if we look at someone working in the jail, 5 people at one post, and we will say that each post, when you include their salary, their training costs, all their benefits, insurance, vacations, everything, we'll just simply say that it's a $60,000 a year line item for that individual. Could be higher, could be lower, and I'll explain the formula here in just a moment. But if we look at that and we say that their salary it never goes up, we said that the benefits never go up, but it's $60,000. Over 20 years, that is going to cost the county $6 million. If it's $70,000 per person, it's $7 million. If it's $45,000, it's $4.5 million. So if we have 5 posts that are 24/7, and it's going to cost $6 million for each post, those 5 posts in the jail over that 30-year period is going to also cost $30 million. Now, you may have other posts in the facility that are manned, first shift, second shift, different numbers of each one. So you can see very quickly that the cost of operating the facility from the total employee cost is critical. What I like to say in this and talk to folks is that each phase of a project, schematic design, design development, and construction documents, you need to tell your architect, we need to do a staffing analysis. We need to know how many folks it's going to take to operate our facility. We need to know what that cost is going to be, because to me, that cost is just as important as how much does it cost to build that. If you make a mistake in a design and the owner has to add another cost just think that over the 30-year period, that could be a $6 million decision. So it's a really big deal in understanding staffing and cost when you're looking at designing or planning and designing the right cost of facility. So with staff, another thing that especially in law enforcement today is how can you retain staff, and also how can you recruit staff to work in your facility. So often, so much of the strategies in the facility is what are we doing with the inmates? How are we getting them through the intake booking? How are we, doing their change out for the clothing room, getting them down to the general population, or releasing them? But I think one of the things that also is just as critical as looking at the health and wellness of the staff that work in the facility. Working in correctional facilities is not the highest paying job. Folks really really need to want to work in what can be a stressful environment, and you need spaces for the staff such that they can have their training, that they can have a fitness area, that they can have simple things like, where do I put my coat? Where do I put my hat when I come to work? That's why little things such as lockers, oversized lockers that, they can put their phone in, they can put their personal belongings in, something that means something to them. Giving them an outdoor space that they can have a break to go out and, eat a meal. Those are things that are critical. They don't cost a lot of money, but they are critical for the recruitment and the retention of keeping staff working in your facility. I'm going to walk you through just a couple of different facilities that we worked on and kind of talk about some things. This is an all precast exterior building. It's a wonderful design. It is much more normalized. It looks like a lot of the other nice buildings in the community. But also, let's keep in mind we're spending a lot of monies on these facilities, and we want to make sure that they are as maintenance free as possible with the material selections from that. So with this facility, I want to talk about 3 points, because this is a design that is really making a difference towards how they're going to be operating. This particular county was under a federal lawsuit over the condition of confinement inside the facility. It was a dated jail that simply just had a lot of problems. They were simply incarcerating inmates and not helping them to become better citizens once they transition back into the community. So one of the things that we did is off the vehicle sally port, which is the yellow area, is that when they come in, the number one box is that we created what we call the pretrial services. This is where a person can be dedicated in each one of these spaces. Once they go through the intoxilizer, they go through a body scanner, is that they can sit down with someone, and before the chain of custody or transfers to the county, they can make a decision. Is this the best place for you to be? Do you need to be at a mental health institution or at a hospital, or something that is more than we could potentially provide in this facility? So it's part of the diversion program. And then at the top here of the box in red, or excuse me, the box with 1, is offices and a conference space for the folks that work in their pretrial diversion. If the county decides, and this is run by the courts, but if the county decides chain of custody, we're bringing them into our facility, we're going to do a booking area. If they decide they immediately need to go into a medical area, we designed here in the purple area both a male and female medical unit that addresses a lot of the things that are much needed in a jail facility today, such as the addiction issues. They're having a withdrawal. They've just, taken a large amount of drugs for some particular reason. We've offered the opportunity to actually house some folks that in most facilities would be transferred or transported to the local hospital, is they're going to be able to do some of the very same things in this unit. It can help with manpower, getting back to that whole number of staff that's needed. If they're able to do this in this facility, then they don't have to take staff out of this building and move them over to a hospital to be able to guard them on a 24/7 watch. That may be a 1 correctional officer, 1 inmate that's in the hospital ratio, where we like to see, at least a 10-to-1 ratio from that perspective with that. The third item in this overall design is, and I think the last 70 or so months has really impacted everyone accepting this on a much regular basis. And it's the video arraignment, the video court that actually can be part of a jail that, you know, the inmates do not have to be transported to a court facility. They can go in and they can have their time with the judge through Zoom or Skype or whatever platform they want to use. But also there's an opportunity in this facility that the judge can come to the jail such that the inmates do not have to be transported back and forth. Something that's being very proactive in our designs is really pushing the video arraignment as well as the courtroom type space with that. But the other thing that's just equally important, which I think over the years has gotten a little bit of a negative connotation with video court or video arraignment, is the opportunity for the inmate to have a moment with their attorney. So the two rooms here in the upper left of this number 3 red box are dedicated solely for that inmate to be able to have time with their with their attorney before they go into this large middle room or the middle room down on the bottom to have video arraignment with the judge. This was a real big deal with the federal lawsuit over the existing facility, which we did not design, but over the existing facility was the inmates, their visitation opportunity, both in a contact, non-contact, as well as in video visitation opportunities within a facility. So this jail is definitely going to be one of the premier jails in the Midwest once it's completed. It's about 60% through construction right now. Just a couple of images of a regional type of a facility that's got multiple buildings on one single campus. This is a 1,002 bed jail. There's actually a juvenile component that's part of the jail, but we've got the minimum medium custody area at the south end, all the core services in the middle, and then the maximum down at one end. And this is designed to be added on to, expanded multiple times to get all the way up to a little over 2,700 beds facility. Then just on the opposite end, just about 143 beds, is a pre-engineered metal building that's got a lot of these same things we're talking about, but just on a smaller scale. Project that we are in design now, that's going to be released very soon to go out to the bidding phase, is another facility, just very different architecture on the exterior, as each one of our facilities are. We want to make sure, again, that we're designing the right jail, the right size, the right cost for each one of the counties. Very large project that we were the master engineer on. It's for the city of Indianapolis, Marion County. It's both courts as well as detention on the site. It's one that's gotten a lot of attention across the country as being one of the new premier facilities, and it will be going through substantial completion in the next few months. So a project I want to spend just a little bit more time on is one that I mentioned earlier, was the Franklin County project in Columbus, Ohio. And DLZ had the fortune and opportunity to be a keynote speaker at the 2021 AJA conference, which was this past April. Although it was held virtually, the full intention was to hold it in Columbus, and for the roughly 3,500, 4,000 people that attend the conference to take a tour of this facility. This is something that is it's very unique, and I think you're going to look at some of the things in the facility here and say, how can I incorporate some of those items in my current facility? One of the things, as we talked earlier about the NIC, but the NIC has publicly noted multiple times that the Franklin County project is a pilot program in the entire United States that addresses best the mental health, addictions, and behavioral management issues with inmates. And this is just an example. I'm going to show a couple things about the idea and the concept of normalization of the space in very durable materials, but making it a little bit more of a normalized space for the inmates, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. This is the bookend counter. Obviously, it's a large county jail, but we're doing other county jails where it's just 2 of these stations instead of all these different stations. So you have to just really scale the size of the facility with what these needs are, because it can be done in a 100-bed jail just as easy as a 3,000-bed jail, something along those lines. So one of the things that's rather unique in this is that the when an arrestee first comes into a facility, it's usually the highest stress level of what that arrestee will have. They can be very combative. They can just resist a lot of things. And so one of the things that we did was we created a seating area with an outdoor landscaped area. And what this can do is, and we've toured facilities and we've seen this in full use, but what this can do is it can serve as a calming effect to the inmate. Obviously, this is not for everyone. We have the holding cells, the detox rooms for folks that just simply do not work in the open waiting. But we've also found and read a lot and talked with a lot of folks that this open waiting style offers many opportunities to lower that threat, to lower that security and safety issue of recent arrestees. And then in the background, you can see is the holding area that we talked about earlier. But this is something that is works very well when implemented. Just got to take a little leap of faith, but it does work well. Also at the same point, at the point of release, is trying to look at more normalized spaces, trying to provide more natural light, softening some of the finishes, still detention grade, but offering those things as well as brightening some colors in the overall environment with that. This is one of the lower level classification levels in the facility. If you can look to the left at the lower level, you still see all the cells, you see all the detention glazing, the doors, all those things like you just might see in any other facility. You'll see very similar types of day rooms with the tables and the stools and things. But some of the things that are obviously very different than maybe what's in your facility is just the abundance of the natural light coming into the space, deep into the space. It creates an entirely different type of a housing unit when you can increase a tremendous amount of natural light into the space. Studies have proven that inmates in these type of spaces, that again is the threat level, the security, the vandalism in the facility is much lower. The same facility also has the traditional single bed cell, 2-bed cells for those higher level of classification issues. One of the things you probably all looked at first off is this mural. And the murals, think of the fathead type of technology, something that's relatively inexpensive but can completely change the environment. This is just one image, but it can be various different things. It can be abstract, it can just be different colors, but again, it's trying to help the programming and the rehabilitation of the overall inmates in the facility. So then you can see something that's a little more traditional, but again, we've had the tremendous amount of natural light that comes into the space. And one of the things you might see is the detention grade carpet that we actually use in the space. This is much more the area where they're going to be watching TV, just the socialization that they have actually out in the day room. Although on both sides, you still see all of the cell fronts with a lot of glass, but you can still see the observation from that. Why you see the 3 monitors here in front is this is a direct supervision facility. Obviously, the non-direct or indirect modular remote style, which is common throughout the Midwest, is also something we do a tremendous amount of designs for that. This is a really cool space, and whether you've got 2 consoles or 6 consoles, the concept is the same. This is a master control room, and this again is looking at what is the right design, what is the right approach for this. Is that this particular county, one of the things that we toured was a communication center. Think of it as a 911 dispatch, where they have a large video wall that if they have more than one person working in the dispatch, or excuse me, in the master control, that they can pull up large monitors on a wall. It's not an expensive line item to do this, but what they have found is that the jails that are doing this, the collaboration and the communication amongst the folks that are controlling and monitoring the doors throughout the facility, whenever there's an incident, some of these large video walls can create a much better observation than maybe simply looking at say a 24 or 30-inch monitor that can be on their desk. Also, as you're designing these, as you can see, these are different heights. Highly recommend to help with staff, the opportunities is to have the adjustable height desk along those lines. Got to say something for our engineers, because it's just equally important whenever you're looking at the right size of a facility. You know, one of the things that we hear so often when we do that life cycle cost analysis, that facility assessment, is we hear a lot of complaints from, you know, the facility folks. I can't access stuff. I don't fit in the chase. I can't replace things. So, you know, one of the things that we really stress, whether it's from the mechanical, the plumbing, the security electronics, the electrical, the technologies, that we want to make sure that things are accessible. Also, for the folks that are working on stuff, that it's safe. You know, we have a lot of conversations with clients of looking at the right materials to use, because we need to make sure that these materials, they work well with maintenance, but also that they're durable and that they're going to last a long period of time. Now, this is just an example of a perimeter chase. To the left, behind what you would see is the whitish color. That's the actual cells for the different housing units, and this is all the back of the system to make everything work. As you can see in the background of this, there's a man lift that can go up and down these perimeter chases, and from that point of view, they can access all the mechanical, plumbing, fire protection, electrical technology, and the security electronics in that space. It works wonderful. Think about it both in a horizontal point of view, but also a vertical point of view whenever you're planning and designing a space like this with your engineers. So just a couple of slides here left. I think that our emphasis on this is that, you know, there's what was once state-of-the-art facilities that may be 30, 40 years old, that a lot of people toured, a lot of people thought that, hey, this is the next great jail. Is that jails at that time versus today, it's very different. And it's just the type of inmates, the number of inmates that we have in those facilities have made those facilities just not operate efficiently like facilities today are. And at DLZ, we're very committed and dedicated to designing the right jails at the right size and the right cost. You know, we've got a lot of people that are very experienced, that literally have worked on dozens of these types of facilities, that know the trends, know what works, knows what needs to be improved in various different types of facilities. You know, one of the things that we take great pride in is every time we have an opportunity to walk in a facility, whether DLZ designed it or not, we want to do that, because we will learn something good and bad in every facility that we walk in, and it just makes us better architects and engineers. So with that, if we have the opportunity to work with one of you, we believe when working with DLZ is that we can make a difference. We can help you, educate you on making the right decisions, making the right choices, designing the right types of spaces, the right size of the facility, and quite honestly, at the right cost. Designing, planning, operating a jail facility is an expensive project, and we believe that we appreciate and respect that every dollar counts, and we want to make sure that you have the right jail at the right cost with that. So with that, sorry about that. With that, thank you. You've got my contact information in the bottom right. I thank you for everyone taking your time here the last 45 minutes or so to just learn about how DLZ looks at correctional design and why we're a little different than most firms. We believe that we've got the right mindset of how we approach these. And if anyone has any questions or comments, if you'd like to express those now, that'd be great. Or again, you have my email address or my phone number there. And you can call me, email me, and I'd love to talk about your facility, even if you're working with someone else. As far as another architect or engineer, we're always here to just bounce ideas off of and thoughts about things. So we just love talking about jails. So thank you.